All right, I'm Todd Little. I'm with a consultant at LKNA17, and what I'm going to talk about today is the question of your strategy. Is your strategy acting more like a bucket or a filter? For a number of years, I was a software executive, and I kept coming across the same problem. Our strategies were looking like buckets. What do buckets do? Buckets collect things. So, had a strategy. Oh, here's a nice idea, let's throw it in here. Here's another nice idea, let's throw it in here. And we just collected all these things, and we had no way of really acting as a filter to say no to things. And I find this to be a fairly common problem. Richard Rummel wrote a book called Good Strategies, Bad Strategies, and he identified a number of things that typical strategies, bad strategies have. They're fluff, they have failure to face the real problem, they're mistaking goals for strategy, they're fuzzy or overly complex strategic objectives, and a couple examples things. Increase market share. What sort of strategy is that? Our fundamental strategy is one of customer-centric intermediation, WTF. Reaching for the impossible to do the impossible. All right, let's do it. And then there's one group that came off-site and had 47 strategies and 178 action items. And of course, action number 122 was create a strategic plan. I think we can all agree that these belong in a bucket. They're crap, and they belong in this bucket. So what do you do instead? The essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. And this is what I came across by Neil Nicolaisen. He's my book partner. And this was enlightening. It came at one of the Agile events in 2004. And he had come across the same problem. And so he created this matrix, and he said, we have to look at where is our market differentiation and where we have mission criticality. And those items that are in the low mission criticality, low market differentiating, they're who cares. What we want to do to these is minimize and eliminate them. Those items that are up in the upper quadrant, high differentiation and high mission criticality, this is where we want to be innovative and creative. This is where we want to focus our intellectual capital to create or sustain a competitive advantage. There are items that are mission critical. We must do them, but we don't create any market differentiation. Right? We must have a payroll system in order to get people paid, but we don't have to have a super duper great one. Right? We just need to be as good as everyone else out there. So this is where we achieve and maintain parity, we mimic, and we simplify. And then there's these rare occasions where we can create a market differentiation, where there's market differentiation, but we don't have to be the ones that own it. We can create a strategic partnership and create a differentiated partnership to extract market value from that differentiation. And I love this model because I've been able to apply it at the corporate level, at product level, and even at the feature level. And it really works quite well and is very simple. And people use it, kit it, and they can use it as a filter. How are we doing things? Take an example of a high-level view of Apple. And you can look back to when Steve Jobs came back into Apple in the late 1990s. And everyone looks at Steve Jobs and they say, oh, what a visionary. He's a great guy. He's creating new stuff. But what was the first thing he did? Apple was on the verge of bankruptcy. They were 2 months away from being bankrupt when he came back in. What did he do? He cut. He simplified. He really reduced the core of what Apple did down to what's a good differentiation, where can they make a mark in the marketplace, and prepared himself to survive so that he could do all the cool new things and waited for the next market. So if we look at there, what did they do? Apple, he focused on new product design, user experience, eventually with the iPod and the iPhone content distribution through iTunes, made arrangements and get parity with Microsoft through bringing Microsoft Office and having arrangement with Microsoft. Eventually moved over to the Intel hardware because that was also parity. And a lot of other software went more towards parity model. If you remember when the iPhone came out, they created a differentiated partnership with AT&T. They didn't have to own a phone network, right? They could create a partnership, and they built competitive advantage through that partnership. They were able to monetize that. And eventually they decided, well, we don't want to have that be only one company. We want to make it broader, and they did that. So they made effective use of that partnership. And then who cares? They got out of the peripheral space. So this is just a really simple model, and what I love about it is a filter. You've got to be able to say no to things And you've got to have a way for, even at the team level, for there to be a filter to say, how am I doing this? Why am I doing this? So we ask yourself, is your strategy a bucket or a filter? If it's a bucket, it's just going to collect things. Filters are what tell you and help you say no to things. So thank you very much. Move on.
So today, this week, conference is about flow, and I thought I'd join in on the fun and making flow possible by using improvement dialogues techniques. There are basically 3 of them: asking powerful questions, using appreciative inquiry, and evolving through improvisation. Now, what time is it? Where's the code? Are not asking powerful questions. So, the first thing we have to realize about asking powerful questions is that coaches are taught how to do this, agile coaches are taught to do this, and they, overuse it. And sometimes it's not the best tool.
Because you will get gifted or gained. I'll give you an illustration. Has anybody ever filled out an employee satisfaction survey? Anybody ever want to say £50 before you answer a question? I used to get in a lot of trouble with this on IBM, but that's a story for another day. They used to say, well, average your experience over the whole year, etc. If your managers consult you on a regular basis, and I phoned up and said, look, some of them do, some of them don't, some of them should, some of them shouldn't. What do I say? They said, average your experience. Well, that's not research.
So, what else have we got in terms of improvement dialogues? Well, we could use appreciative inquiries. But appreciative inquiry comes from the medical field.
It's like people like appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is a technique that comes sideways from therapy. And all techniques that come sideways from therapy privilege the therapist and assume that people need therapy.
So, powerful questions and appreciative inquiry and the kind of work that we do are interesting, but is it still the only tools that we have? So, according to you, the human race has evolved and survived by asking powerful questions, using appreciative inquiry, or evolving through improvisation? Well, yes, we've evolved through improvisation. Improvisation is also a primary tool that makes us better, that makes us not stick to a plan, and to choose and survive in our environment. There's also compelling evidence that it makes us better. It makes us care about other people, about what they do, what they need. And in the age in which we live, collaboration and cooperation, social engineering is important and is a big part of Kanban. Also, in the static approach, it's clearly stated that at a certain point, asking questions is not the proper thing to do. For example, when we go to the first phases of the static approach, we identify the source of dissatisfaction through descriptions, through narrative, through collaboration. And the Socratic method, as taught by Goldratt, has been, very negative, to the extent that the Socratic method of asking why is very often misused. And you can find all of this information in David's book, Lessons in Management. And again, Dave Snowden. What's the problem with asking questions? What agile coaches do over and over again is that it leads to spiraling, giving, or taking. And a failure mode, it's also a very bad thing because asking questions in failure mode requires you to have a high level of trust. And this can only be found in Navy Team SEALs and in small groups whose life depend on it. And again, narrative form of thinking is the best for complexity. And Olaf and Chris, ideas of value, Ideas expire later if you say yes and never kill an idea early by asking why. Just a second.
A question every once in a while, that's fine. But there's some people that all they do is they ask questions. So you won't fish anymore. Fish anywhere on stage, won't fish anywhere in the business world. And the last part of it is yes and. And yes and is simply this. On stage, if I give somebody something and I say, Mary, let's go to the movie. All she has to do.
Okay. Hello. My name is Minton Brooks, and I'm here to talk to you about introducing Kanban in a global technical services organization. And I want to introduce myself first because I'm new to the conference, I'm new to the community, so I thought it would be good to let you know where I'm coming from. I've coached for a long time, first in context of unified process and variance, and then Scrum, and then later Scaled Agile Framework. And in that, I was introduced to Kanban, and for the last year, around the initiative that I'm going to be talking about, that's what I've been doing. So, working within a really large organization that is basically challenged with keeping up with margins, with growth, and they have an amazing workforce. So the challenge, the pressure is felt by that workforce in the form of highly overburdened environments. And that's sort of the setup for the challenge that I've been part of, that they wanted to go agile in a big way, and they wanted to get it done yesterday. So unfortunately, the recent history, there have been two major initiatives that have brought transformation fatigue, and this presents itself in my work as resistance because a third wave coming their way feels automatically like it must be another case of push. So there was a big lean initiative that failed, followed by a customer-centric approach that failed, and so that's the context of bringing out the Kanban evolutionary approach. Within the company, there's a struggle, in fact, between Scrum, whose foundation is push and around a creative use of the word efficiency, that the J-curve begins in their case with basically removing 20 or 30% of the business unit before they even start agile work. And as an alternative approach, we've been bringing a perspective of evolutionary change. So this is the dynamic that's been set up, and believe it or not, the Scrum Agile has been pushed into the global technical services, which sets up an incredibly confusing environment for what we're doing and for the business units that are trying to deal with such heavily contrasting implementations. So we basically felt like, because it's a single global system that's highly interdependent and highly susceptible to disruption, to bring it, introduce it as a static rollout that's very thin. You're looking at in fact, the global coaching staff is in front of you. And we're underway with it. I've been on the road. I got back last night, and I left on March 11th. And I've been doing this work since August 1st. And it's been an incredible experience. I've really met so many great people. So I just want to let you know the most inspiring piece for me is just to be able to meet so many amazing teams and interact with them, and they love Kanban, okay? And the earliest metrics we have been around employee satisfaction, and it's been very satisfying to be part of that. And I look forward to the possibility of informing you at some other point. Stay tuned. Thank you.
So today I'd like to talk about iatrogenics. If you don't know what iatrogenics is, it means harm by the healer. And I'm going to tell two stories to help you understand how this harm is actually very, very bad harm and why it might be important for you as coaches, trainers, leaders. Why it might be important for you to think about whether you actually have iatrogenic behavior. Let me get something out of the way first. My name is Gabe Abella. I'm an organizational coach at JPMorgan Chase. I just want to also reiterate that the opinions I'm going to share on this stage are my own and not that of JPMorgan Chase. I'm also a accredited Kanban trainer as well as a Kanban management professional. Also happy to be a Flow Lab facilitator. And these are great tools for us to, again, extend Kanban in our context. But I want to start this story with pie, apple pie, and maybe specifically because of where we are, close to the nation's capital. We're going to talk about the history of American pie. And the way you make pie is essentially you add flour with some sort of fat, and you get some nice crust. Everyone likes a nice flaky crust to make a pie. And you made pie that way up until about 1911, when someone decided or figured out you could actually add hydrogen to vegetable oil, or in this case, cottonseed oil. And you really intended to make soap, which was great. That's what it's supposed to do. That was what they intended to do. But it was also fit for purpose, potentially for something else. It looked like fat. So we just stuck a label on it and started cooking with it. It's back in 1911. And then something happened about Crisco. They did something really, really smart. They gave away this free cookbook with about 100 recipes, free. And then something happened around 1940s, World War II. Because of rationing, we had to save all of our really nice fat products for our fighting men and women, maybe more men specifically at that time. And 1950s came around, Dr. Ansel Keys said something really, really strongly. He said, fat from animals will kill you. And it just so happened that we had this new fat available that didn't come from an animal. And now we're going to make some pies. This is what pies look like, but let's look at it a little bit closer. It's about 100 years worth of pies that we've made. We'll start with the trifecta. 1911, we got some new fat. 1960s, 80s come along. The Food and Drug Administration says, keep going. Keep making those pies that way. They're really delicious. 1990s come around. And we say, wait a second, slow down. Something weird about those pies. Keep eating them. And then 2013 comes around, and we say, wait a second, the way that you make your pies is really, really bad. So stop it. And stop using the thing that we told you to use about 100 plus years. And we'll look at our pies, and we see some curves here which says, hey, we made a bunch of pies beginning of the century, got a little bit concerned because people were getting sick, and then we had to change our behavior. It took how long? 100 years. Why were we getting sick? Well, it turns out that adding hydrogen to stuff makes trans fat very, very effectively. Anyone know what this equation is? Excellent. What trans fat does is it drives your bad cholesterol up and your good cholesterol down, and this creates heart disease. This is iatrogenics. Makes pies deadly. Now let's think about knowledge work now. Let's go back to 1911. Frederick Winslow Taylor writes a book, very fit for purpose, which is how do you actually effectively solve a problem, which is take uneducated workers into the city and really make some money out of it. be really effective, efficiency. 1959 comes along, Frederick Drucker sort of coins the term knowledge worker, really, really helpful. 1964, IBM 360, more knowledge work out there. Fred Brooks' Mythical Man Month talks about essentially, adding more people to a project later, makes it later. Why? Because it's knowledge work. Oh, here we go. Took a while, 35 years. David Anderson comes around, writes a great book, even nicer condensed version with Andy Carmichael. This is great, let's do some knowledge work. About 100 years. What we did is we took this fit-for-purpose thing for mechanical labor and applied it to deterministic knowledge work, and it created very bad things. It created a lot of harm. What kind of harm? Well, anyone know what this equation is? This is your well-being. On top are your happy chemicals, your happy hormones. On the bottom are your bad hormones. So on the bottom, on top, you have your dopamine, endorphin, oxytocin, serotonin, things that actually inject in your brain when you do good things. On the bottom, you have epinephrine, also known as, anyone? Adrenaline, cortisol. When you apply deterministic methods to knowledge work, you get really stressed out. You get really sick. And you probably felt this is why we're all here today talking about this way to apply knowledge work, methods to do knowledge work. But it's interesting. We also have an approach, a probabilistic approach to actually do knowledge work. The question is, how long are we going to actually take to fix this problem? Because we've already spent 100 years on it. Just a question for you folks. Do you actually know whether your team members, your leaders, your coaches, are you actually having iatrogenic behavior? And if you do, or if you want to be curious about it, come to my talk at 5 p.m. I'd love to share some ideas about that. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, my name's Howard Myers. I'm from Cerner. My talk's a little bit different, I think, than the other ones. We've been doing work in my company, doing some flow coaching, doing some improvements of how we're using, working with the teams and their behavior changes to get improvements in how we're doing flow. So just a little bit of Cerner, the splashing some numbers here, a large healthcare IT solution and service company, a global company. They're around in lots of hospitals in the United States and around the world. A little bit about, this is more about my personal journey involved with this. So I started way back in a waterfall company. I went through a couple acquisitions here. We started going through the normal kind of a Scrum, going from waterfall, trying out Scrum, going from manual to something more automated. We went into we really worked on some Kanban. Then we've been doing that for several years. In the meantime, the larger company we got acquired from, they started doing Scrum. They're a little bit behind us in years, and they started really picking up and doing some of the Kanban and some of those lean practices after that. So our journey together, we are in all different places, and so by putting it together, we're really getting a lot of good learnings between all these different companies that are put together. Okay, so what we're talking about is a flow. So flow definition, I think we've been seeing this in other talks here about what our definition of flow. We're looking at that system stability of the arrival rate being in equilibrium with the delivery rate. We want to look at flow efficiency. It got a little graph got a little overwritten there. So what we want to do is be able to have that looking at the efficiency of how we're working through the system. And we want to understand where our blocks are, where we are in weights. So what we did is we use this influencer model. I think in that we can really focus on some results, some key attributes. We can look at some, really behind this is about vital behaviors. We want to understand from a team level, from a personal level, what are those things which will make real specific, tangible, manageable change. When we do that, we can use that based on some influence factors. So influence factors we can look at you can go through this we went through this kind of an exercise where we looked at first diagnosing this is from a personal, social, structural level, diagnosing where they're at, and then understand from that where there's motivation and behind that what the abilities are. So we can take this model, put this together, go through some specific things that we can do from, like I said, from each person that's on the team. We can look at it from a team view. We can look at it from an organization view. And the structural, we can look at it from an environmental, what's behind the scenes. So this was a really good model that we took into our product area so that we can see where we were looking for specific results with flow. So what we went through is we went through Kanban analytics. We looked at the teams. We understand where they're at, doing an assessment on the team. We didn't necessarily have to do a formal assessment with questions, things like that. We can do that with very little intrusion in that. So we can understand where they're at just by looking at the analytics. We can then do some deep dive flow coaching. We can look at some of the core practices there that you see down there, and then review the results from the team. So we can see things here. So I'm going to show you a series of charts that we have. So you can see here from purely flow efficiency calculation, we can see the top one was a team that had good flow, bottom one with bad flow. Interesting, the bottom team had a higher number, but now we look at data quality. If you look at the bottom left, 0% flow efficiency. So we have some data quality issues, and we can start understanding behaviors of why that happened. We can also look at system stability, so we can see, so this is over time, we can look at a team which has good flow. You can see from a CFD, the top chart's development, middle chart's support, bottom chart is the average age of open items that are on the board. We can see pretty much constant, and the lines are pretty close there. I mean, pretty much in parallel. We go to a non-flow team, see where the hours are. There's some key events here. They have some key behaviors of where they're at, so we can understand, we can see the average age, how it's really not as stable. So we can put them together, and then what we did afterwards is after our coaching, we can see this is the team that was not in flow. We can look at a scatter chart, and we can see that there was some significant change here from pre and post. You can see the scatter at the bottom right where they were really controlling that. We can also see that the arrival time, we can see that more in parallel. This was after we did some of that training. We can see, and then we can go through, and this is an example of a reporting chart. Next step, so what we want to think about is our next step is building a balanced scorecard, doing deep diving, and continuing. I think it's key is with this influencer model to help them to get better conversations and to get better team improvements. Thank you.
It's easier when you know how to use the clicker, right? Good afternoon. I am Vikas Kapila, here just to talk about something I've seen a lot when I do coaching, collaboration. One of the most used words in our industry as coaches, scrum masters, flow masters and everything. What is collaboration? It's going to be a collaborative session for us. I need feedback from you. I don't have any other slides. That's why my clicker is right there, right? So what is collaboration? Sorry? Talking, all right? What else? Talking to what end? Co-creation, right? So when I am in a session, let's call it collaborative session. Let's talk about any collaborative session we are in. What would one be in our general industry? Example, backlog refinement is supposed to be a collaborative session, right? But when the alleged product owner walks in and says, hey, I have written up this story for you and I've written these acceptance criteria, let's review them and let me know what the estimation is. Is there any collaboration happening there? What's the collaboration happening there? Somebody said yes. Right. Is that collaboration or cooperation? That's important, right? The distinction between cooperation and collaboration. Collaboration is co-creation. If the story was written by somebody in a silo and the acceptance criteria written somewhere else, where is the input of the team there? Is the input You've already made the decision when you've written that story. All you're asking for some minor course correction. Otherwise, you say, oh, that's not the intent, let's change the intent. Change request. Right? So is collaboration an asset or a liability in that environment of collaboration? No right or wrong answers, only our answers. It's a liability. Why? Because it did not follow the intent of the collaboration. There was no co-creation. Any other suggestions of a collaborative environment we see? How can we make an environment collaboration? Come on, we can make this room collaborative in less than 3 minutes. Deciding where to start next, right? So you need collaboration before you decide. You don't want collaboration after you've decided, right? Critical element there. So how would you say this product manager alleged could be collaborative in their essence? What would have been different in that backlog refinement that could have made it collaborative? Rather than coming up with the story and the acceptance criteria, what would be a basic step, evolutionary step the product owner can take? Yes. You and I are just co-creating here, I know, Steve. Thank you for that. The others are being cooperative and silent. Right. Right. That would be a good start, right? Rather than saying, this is what I need. What is the story? Is the story really the what? What is the story supposed to be talking about? It's supposed to be talking about the problem statement of the customer. That's how you represent the customer. In most of our stories, aren't we representing the requirements already? This is what I want. This is what the system should be doing. This is what... So somehow our stories are not the what anymore. They're the solution. And they've been decided too early, even before the commit process, even during our options, we are writing stories. We are writing them as solutions. There's no option left for the execution team anymore. You've decided what to do. There's no opportunity for collaboration left. In such an environment, collaboration just remains a liability. Funnily, and I was so impressed with that slide, close to last from Patrick, when he talked about agile development, and right there he talked about collaboration within team. And he said what agile business needs, not collaboration, but co-creation. And we've forgotten that, literally. In most of our coaching I observe at least, I've seen is it's all about cooperation and coordination, very little about collaboration. Yeah. Exactly. What are we trying to accomplish? First and foremost, oh, I'm almost there. Are we good? Does that make sense? To watch ourselves from not making collaboration a liability, but making it an asset by letting the environment of co-creation come about? Cool. Thank you.